Hello, and welcome to Marketing Superpowers, how AI and no-code transform every marketer into a maker. Are you ready to begin your adventure? Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to Ava, the artificial intelligence virtual artist. So what I did in preparing for this presentation is I logged into Ava AI and I clicked to create a new track. Ava let me choose what style of music I wanted. I could have uploaded tracks of my favorite artists as influences if I wanted. I chose, we'll go with the fantasy adventure theme. You select what key you want it in, the pacing, instrumentation, how long. I said, 30 seconds, and how many compositions I wanted Ava to create. And Ava created 3 incredibly orchestrated pieces for me, literally in under a minute, plugged it into my presentation, and here I have an original orchestrated theme to talk with you today. This is where we are headed. You know, AI and no code are increasingly taking us as marketers from a place where we used to ask the question, what if, to now we can ask the question, well, what about this? So I'm Scott Brinker. It is a real pleasure and honor to be here with you today. I am the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, where I run the App Partner Program. I'm the editor of the chiefmartech.com blog, where I've been writing about the intersection of marketing and technology for, goodness, over a decade now. The program chair of the MarTech conference, the author of Hacking Marketing. Essentially, yes, 24/7, 365 days a year. Marketing technology is my bag. You can follow me on Chief Martech at Twitter. So actually, even before I joined HubSpot, the previous gig I had is I was the co-founder and CTO of a company called Ion Interactive that, well over 15 years ago, was one of the first platforms to empower no-code landing pages for marketers. And over time, this expanded into giving marketers the ability to create no-code interactive content, things like quizzes and assessments and calculators. So I've kind of been a long-time fan of this power of letting marketers create without having to have dependencies, on other specialists to do their work. Now, for framing today's session, I really should start by saying, when I talk about no code, to me, it's more than just creating without code, like the introduction, theme we had from Ava. That is really more broadly about creating without limits. And we're going to go into a whole bunch of fun examples here. So we're coming out. Light is at the end of the tunnel of what has been a crazy past year, and it really has been a transformational year because businesses forced to really lean in to digital capabilities, both for how they run internally, but also how they engage with customers, accelerated a lot of this digital transformation that we've been talking about for years and years. It really has started to happen at an incredible rate. And I love this slide by Gartner. They came out with it a couple months ago, talking about what this new environment is going to be like for businesses, through this, once we get to the other side of this. And I just want to highlight a couple of the things that they see in this environment ahead. More technology, flatter and faster organizations. As part of that, having to wrangle with increased organizational complexity, but also empowering those flatter, faster organizations to do rapid decision-making, and within that context, see the emergence of really a new generation of top-tier employees. Now, part of what's powering this is way down at the foundational level has been just an incredible set of advances happening in AI and machine learning. Really over the past couple years, so many of these technologies, the combination of the algorithm, the incredibly cheap computing power, the unlimited data size that we have access to has really made AI incredibly effective. And what we're seeing now is a lot of these AI technologies are increasingly embedded in no-code tools to make them more powerful. And in turn, these tools are powering more and more creators outside of the walls of our organizations, and then really even the empowered marketers, employees within the corporation as well too. I think of the creator economy as sort of one variation of this, and we've seen a certain amount of talent come out of corporations and become independent, creators, enjoying the boundaryless creation, that these no-code tools are enabling. But we also see the flow of talent in the other direction too, that these empowered creators become an incredible force inside the organization where they get to bring, that power of creativity, and apply it in an environment where we can scale the impact of that through the corporation. So we could do a whole session here just on the amazing things that are happening in the creator economy. But today I really do want to focus on, in the corporate economy, how we're leveraging these new tools and capabilities to power this emergence of top-tier employees. So let's start by talking about three kinds of no-code superpowers. There's automation. Hey, let me automate the activities and processes that I used to have to do manually. Augmentation, imbue me with new powers to create and analyze. What Ava gave me is I feel like, yeah, I could be like the next John Williams, conducting my own orchestra here. And then integration. Because for both automation and augmentation, it's about how do we do this in the context of connecting with the rest of the systems and data that are in our work environment. And it's these three things together that to me is this universe where no-code capabilities are just bringing an incredible impact to what the individual contributor, in an organization can do. So we're here at, Workato Automate. So, this is a perfect context to, lean into talking about the automation and the integration side of this, which are often very deeply intertwined. Let's step back for a moment and talk a little bit just on the integration side. So one of the things that I've been doing over the past decade, kind of a strange hobby of mine, is I've been collecting a landscape of all the different marketing technologies that I could find in the world. This was the most recent map from last year. I mean, it's kind of gone out of control. Here you can see a marketer in the wild actually trying to use this landscape. It started out, as a pretty humble project. The first version of that landscape I did in 2011, had around 150 different marketing technologies on it, which at the time certainly seemed like a lot, but it really did grow exponentially over the years. Last year's had, 8,000 different marketing technologies. To be honest, what we've been tracking so far is it's kind of only grown from there. I mean, we're talking about over 5,000% growth over the past decade. That's pretty wild. And if you're thinking, oh man, my goodness, what is strange about MarTech that causes there to be so many of these apps out here? Actually, this is where we'll bring in the meme from Jurassic Park, like hold on to your butts, because this isn't just MarTech. IDC has predicted that over 500 million digital apps and services will be developed and deployed using cloud-native approaches by 2023. Now, granted, the vast majority of those are not going to be, packaged apps that you buy off the shelf, although thousands and thousands of them will be. The largest number of them will be custom apps. But still, it puts us in an environment where we are now in our work, our daily operations, needing to manage multiple different apps interacting together. The folks at Airtable, who are another no-code tool, we'll talk a bit about them a little bit further on. They actually recently did a study, and they had found for marketers like the number of tools that they use on a regular basis, on average, the median here was around 20 to 29 tools just for the marketing team used on a regular basis. Now, at the same time, they ask these marketers, well, about how much time do you spend each week, on manual operational tasks? And the median here was 30 to 39%, right? Well over a third of the week for most marketers, goes to juggling manual operational tasks. And here was what was actually a little bit surprising, although maybe not surprising once you stop and think about it for a moment, that if you look at those two things together, like the average percentage of work week spent on manual operational tasks based on the number of tools that your marketing team uses on a regular basis, you'll see that it moves up and to the right. It's almost counterintuitive that the more tools we're using, the more time we're spending on manual operational tasks. And I think it's this challenge that we really see as the opportunity, in no code for automation and integration to be able to help us get our arms around this, to be able to automate across many different tools to execute the work we're doing. And clearly this is, we're at our, Workato Automate. So surprise, surprise, this is one of the great things that, Workato is so good at. There's going to be a number of great sessions here throughout the day that we'll dive into plenty of examples of that. But I just wanted to even highlight one because it just makes so much sense. This idea that, we have things that get triggered somewhere in the digital universe of our business. And based on those triggers, we want to be able to fire off a whole sequence, of activities. If a customer signs up, we want to be able to trigger a custom welcome. We want to assign them to a customer success team. We might want to do a report in Slack, schedule onboarding and training, connect up to our financial systems for invoices and billing, do provisioning of the actual services themselves. And I mean, this sort of stuff, right? It's not hypothetical. I'm probably preaching to the choir on this, but, at HubSpot where I work, we use Workato, one of the examples is, how we have product data that flows into Snowflake. We're then filtering that into Looker where we can identify things like product usage change or main contact removed in an account. This can serve as one of those triggers, that then allows us to have a whole sequence of activities, for alerting the correct, customer success manager, and getting them engaged, and working in a very timely manner with that customer. Jeff Da Silva, who's a business automation analyst at HubSpot, had said, if we turned Workato and all its automated processes off, it would take 57 people to manually do those tasks. The tool pays for itself while generating revenue. The ROI is just staggering. So again, there'll be a lot of great sessions here throughout the day, on harnessing the power of Workato. But I want to give you some other examples of no-code tools. And so I'm mostly going to lean into the section around augmentation. And we'll look at, about 5 or 6 different tools here doing different things to give you a sense of just what's possible. So in web page development, right, we've made such advances, over the past 10 years. So one of the most popular tools out there now for this is Webflow. Some of you might be familiar with, the people software company Lattice. They use Webflow for their web properties. Their marketing team who controls this has 0 developers. They have 2 designers who design new pages. And then they have 12 marketers, who are not developers, not designers, but they can work, for creating content, around this tool. And to give you a sense of what's possible there, it's not just Lattice's primary website. Once they realized that they could use Webflow to create all sorts of web properties, incredibly efficiently. They said, oh, all right, well, what are some things we might want? Like they created a whole Lattice University, for helping customers be able to get the training, on how to leverage Lattice to its fullest capabilities. They realized a lot of their customers were like, navigating change management inside their own organizations. So they created a special change management hub that those customers could use to access key resources. Working with the sales team, they were able to create these like custom portals that could be developed, for high value accounts. I mean, wow, talk about, winning some love from the sales organization. When your marketing team is able to empower them with this sort of sales enablement, that is a real win. And so again, it's like if you now look at how Lattice is leveraging, web properties throughout their marketing, organization, right? It's not just one site, it's all these things being pulled together. This is the power of no code. Airtable, so I mentioned them earlier with regards to that study. This was a quote I had found on Twitter from AJ Curry, who was talking about how she had used Airtable to organize thousands of pieces of content for the NFL 100, easily linking each content piece to clubs, players, legends, all this. Now, AJ Curry is not a developer. AJ Curry is the senior manager of social media and emerging platforms at the NFL. And she was able to do all of this on her own with Airtable. So I talked to the folks at Airtable, and they gave me another example. I could actually dive in and show you a little bit. They're used by a number of entertainment companies like Netflix and Hulu. And I can't mention Netflix at this moment without saying, all right, this is kind of an embarrassing confession, but I've really been enjoying that series Cobra Kai. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, the whole Karate Kid thing, it kind of stuck with me. I almost feel like somewhere in here, I should be able to work in like a, Cobra Kai related, metaphor. So, all right, we'll come back to that, I promise. Anyway, so what I want to show you here is a mock-up that Airtable put together of the way, companies like Netflix are using it. And this isn't the actual Netflix database. So if you're looking for spoiler alerts on your favorite show, it's not here. But essentially, Netflix and companies like that were using this to empower all their marketing operation structure around what were the different tables of data for, titles of shows and campaigns and deliverables and tasks and requests and vendors, and being able to very easily interrelate all of these things. And they can keep track of these, things, in like, Kanban board style views or, Gantt charts for, project deliveries or, diving into all sorts of analysis, and reporting dashboards of how these things are going. So like when you look at something like Airtable, you might be asking yourself, well, what is this? Is it a database? Is it like sort of a workflow tool? Is it a project management tool? In many ways, it's kind of all of these things mixed together. And I think this is, one of the themes you'll see again and again, with more and more of these no-code tools is part of what they're doing is they're crossing traditional boundaries of technology to really focus on use cases. In this case, like sort of the marketing operation structure, that a company like Netflix wanted to use. All right, so while we're sort of in this whole like, web and interactive experience side of things, I want to highlight another no-code tool called Bubble. So Bubble, takes this whole web development thing even further, allowing you to actually create essentially like interactive web apps. I actually used Bubble for the creation of my site, martech5000.com, which is where we keep track of all the data for that crazy landscape. And again, like Webflow, you're able to lay out things visually. I don't need to be a designer, but now I can also get to a place where like I associate interactivity and logic and functionality with the different elements on these pages as well too. By the way, as it happens, for the data behind the scenes for that MarTech 5000, we're using Airtable. Anyway, if you want to see a really wild example of all the things, that Bubble can really start to do, I suggest you go check out a site called MarTech Base. It was created by this fellow, Agu Rajan, who, just did this whole thing in Bubble. It's a really interactive way to be able to analyze your MarTech stack and keep track of different tools. It'll blow your mind. And all of that is a no-code site. But it's not just the web. All right, I wanted to show you an example with a VoiceFlow. So VoiceFlow is a no-code tool that lets people build interactive voice assistants for platforms like, Alexa. Like you start out, you say, see, my local Alexa is like, yes, can I help you? I'm like, no, Alexa, don't worry about it. I got this. You come in, VoiceFlow, you can create your profile, what you want to create, an Alexa skill or a Google Assistant thing. In this case, I decided I'll start playing around with creating my own Alexa skill. I give it, an invocation name. And then I'm in this, really simple visual flow of like, okay, well, I want to, open up. I'm going to ask a question of what would you like to create today?
What would you like to create today?
I can then listen for the different intents from what people, respond. I can use that to trigger new activities. This is kind of wild, right? I can actually, even through VoiceFlow, turn around and end up publishing this, off to Amazon. All right, so all those sorts of cool things, but there's more. But wait, there's more. What about data analysis? So of course we've got all sorts of cool stuff, for, dashboards of every kind these days, but we're actually seeing no-code tools that are going even further to give us non-data scientists the ability to do a lot of things that previously we would have had to rely on a data scientist for. Just one of these tools is a company called Obviously AI. Obviously AI, without being a data scientist, like you can pull data into this and from even just a marketing perspective, use it to start doing things like predictive analytics on, churn or, net promoter scores. You can use it for, determining things like next best offers in campaigns, doing multi-channel marketing attribution. I mean, this sounds really cool, but let me show you how easy this is. So basically you start out on Obviously AI and you say, okay, well, where do I want to bring data into this? It might be, like a data warehouse you have, with, something like, Redshift, Amazon, or maybe you're connecting it like to your CRM system, like Salesforce or, HubSpot. And then, basically it pulls in the data. You're then able to say, okay, in this case, let's say I want to predict customer churn. And so it looks across all the historical data there, in these different attributes and fields, and it's able to identify, okay, well, this is sort of, what the churn rate has been. We can extrapolate from there. And then it's able to identify those different characteristics that contribute the most to churn. In the sample file, uploaded here, it might be like, okay, well, monthly charges, for a particular, a mobile phone service, is the, top driver, of churn. But then after that are things like internet service and impact of paperless billing and, total charges. And what's cool is not only do you get to see, what those characteristics are for that existing data set, but now you can start to do hypothetical questions of like, okay, well, if I was doing a campaign to a different kind of persona and these were going to be their characteristics, can you give me predictions on what that impact would be? And this is wild to be able to do all of this without being a, trained data scientist. All right, one last augmentation tool, and I'm just barely scratching the surface of, hundreds that are out there. But this should be one you should check out, Banner Bear. They've got all these APIs, you should be able to leverage them in Workato here to be able to dynamically generate images for everything from like ad campaigns or social media campaigns. If you want, you can even just go to their site, play around with Tweetagram, give you an idea here. You give it a tweet, it turns it into Instagram ready images for you. Well, yeah, I guess I'll pick my Cobra Kai related tweet and here I go. I've got my Instagram image ready to go. But you can imagine like being able to automate all this using your automation and integration, no code tools as well too. Seriously cool stuff, right? All right, but here's what gets really exciting about this, leaning into that integration side, is it's these combinations, not just the burger, fries, and soda, but, being able to combine tools across this entire spectrum of no code. I mean, one of the things that just amazes me about Workato is it has already over 500,000 ready to use recipes, of all these different ways that you can combine things together. I mean, would you say I have a plethora of no-code combinations? Yes, 500,000 plus recipes definitely qualifies as a plethora. And again, what's so cool about this, is to get a little bit nerdy. All right, not been kind of nerdy all the way, but yeah, even a little bit more nerdy. This really plugs into something that is known as combinatorial innovation. It's not just about creating things, in their own individual, isolated, universe. It's about how we take all these different pieces of things that exist, and it's by combining them together in interesting new ways that we unlock new value and new innovation. And I mean, man, we could go so much further with this. There's, a bunch of no-code tools that are being built on other no-code tools, like these 4 companies that have built web templating tools that sit on top of Airtable, pull Airtable data, and then instantly can, turn them into these dynamic websites as well too. So it's no code standing on top of no code, pretty wild stuff. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into some of these forces, around this and driving behind it. First of all, this advancing AI, I mentioned it at the very beginning. This is just, I mean, it's certainly, we've started to unlock real value from AI over these past couple of years, but we are just getting started, So a number of you are probably familiar, have heard about GPT-3, which was released last summer by, OpenAI, and it's a natural language system, AI powered, that generates language that it's kind of like, if you haven't seen it, it's hard to believe, but it sounds, like a human was writing these things, but it's an AI engine, and so this AI engine is now available as an API. It's being plugged into a whole bunch of, cool startups, like Other Side AI. This is a cool use. So for writing email, you just come up with a set of bullets of what you want to say, right? Because isn't that how most email goes? It's like, the handful of things you want to say, take you 10 seconds to write them down. But carefully crafting the email, takes much longer. Well, no fear. Other Side AI using GPT-3 takes your bullets and automatically turns it into a beautifully written email. And you can do it in different styles and try it and all that. And of course, all right, that's one, I personally will find that very helpful. But, this can be embedded into a new set of marketing tools like Headline that uses GPT-3 to help with the writing of, copy, whether it's for product pitches or taglines or, Facebook ads. Really, really pretty wild stuff. And it's just getting cooler from here. So that same group, OpenAI, earlier this year released something called DALL-E. What DALL-E does is it takes text descriptions and it uses that to automatically generate images. And there's a few demos that they put together. I just got to show this to you because if you haven't seen this, it'll blow your mind. All right, so type in a text description like, I would like an illustration of a baby daikon radish in a tutu walking a dog. Okay, yeah, this is, I'm not sure who came up with this. It wasn't me, I swear. All right, but, DALL-E takes that and what do you end up with? A bunch of illustrations of baby daikon radishes in tutus walking dogs. I mean, wow. Okay, maybe I'd like an armchair in the shape of an avocado. What might that look like? There we go, armchairs in the shape of avocados. Well, if I want a storefront that has the word OpenAI written on it, well, not a problem. And again, this is just getting started, but you can kind of see this whole no code-ish empowerment augmentation. That instead of having to search through libraries and libraries, of stock photography, you get to a place where what Ava did with, our musical soundtrack at the opening, for me, just as a marketer, I have an idea of something I want to see, and I can leverage something like DALL-E to instantly create it. Wild stuff. All right, so it keeps getting bigger and better from here. So I want to talk a little bit about a shift happening from big data to big ops, because it's really related to this empowerment of no-code tools throughout an organization. Now, you've probably heard the phrase, data is the new oil. I'm not a big fan of this phrase. I actually prefer data is the new oil paint. Why? Well, first of all, because, oil is a commodity. One price for oil, you don't really distinguish between it. But oil paints, like data, can actually vary in value. You can have like a tube of oil paint that you pick up at your local arts and crafts supply store for $6. But then there are also, rarer, tubes of oil paint that can run you, well, like this Old Holland Classic cadmium orange for, hey, it's on sale, $264 for a little tube. But hey, it includes free shipping, so that's good. Right? So it's a little bit like data, that there's a range of value. But also, the reason I like this metaphor is because as with data, it's not about the oil paints itself. The real value is what we create with them. With data, the real value is what we create with it. And this is this incredible shift that's happening today, where we're coming from a time where, there is so much obsession over big data. How do we deal with the scale and complexity of all this data collected, stored, and analyzed, to increasingly an environment of big ops, which is what we're doing on top of that data, the scale and complexity of all the apps and agents and automations and, customer touch points that are interacting with that data. I mean, one way to visualize this is you think of big data as a faraway data lake that you had to hike to get to. You needed a professional guide to hike to get to. The big ops is more of an environment, let's say an interactive water park, where everyone's engaging in this and participating in it. And we see this with the incredible explosion of all these different ops-related functions throughout the modern organization, right? It isn't just marketing ops or DevOps, it's things with content ops and web ops and data ops and AI ops and sales ops, and how these things all interact with the same connected digital infrastructure for our business. I will say, I think there are two centers of gravity that's driving a lot of this, DevOps, from a world of how we think about creating and deploying software inside and outside of our organizations, and RevOps of how we think about managing all of this data and interactions, the workflow throughout our business and with our customers, to capture value out of this. So it's in that environment, in which no-code tools are just empowering so many people in the organization to participate directly in that big ops environment. But what does that mean? Having all these people engaging with these tools, can we manage no-code, or does it become herding cats, as this old commercial from 20 years ago is showing? And the short answer is yes. Yes, we can manage this. So I want to give you, sort of closing out here, a little bit of how I think about no-code management. And part of it is going back to this Gartner diagram, where at the end of the day, flatter, faster organizations, rapid decision-making, emergence of top-tier employees, working in that environment. This is just the reality of the new business environment we're in. I call this the access of GSD, getting stuff done. And maybe if there was one piece of this more than anything else that has impact, it's this concept of flatter and faster organizations, which in a no-code environment, in a MarTech environment, I would translate into supporting decentralized self-service. So traditionally, when we thought about things that needed to be done in marketing, we very often had to send it through, these centralized service bureaus, whether it was our IT department, or it might even have been an outsourced agency. But the thing about no-code tools is, for more and more use cases, they're providing decentralized self-service. That actually, if I want something done, I might be able to do a fair number of those things just on my own using these no-code tools. This has so many advantages. First of all, speed, right? Instead of waiting in a queue for somebody else to do this, I can just immediately self-service it. That instantly changes the bandwidth, right? Because it's not, all these things don't have to be like bottlenecked, through a narrow and sequential centralized team. You have wide parallel bandwidth, through all the participants who have access to these tools. This taps into much greater creativity, right? It's not the creativity of the few, it's the creativity of the many, many diverse ideas. This is really, we started out this presentation about, imagination as, marketers, source of power. This is what we want to be able to unleash. And part of that then is also, learning. We know we need more digitally sophisticated skill sets, but we learn by doing, and so empowering decentralized self-service actually widely distributes that learning. I love this article. You should Google it, Why No-Code Operations Will Be the Next Big Job in Tech. And a couple things I just wanted to highlight from it, this idea that these solutions can be built in 1/10 of the time and iterated on even faster because of this decentralized self-service. But also, when the person who feels the pain is also empowered to build the solution, the result is magical and utterly unique. We come from a world where we used to think of code and configuration as really opposite ends of the spectrum, right? You could either, be coding things in scratch from JavaScript, or using, non-technical configuration of a tool like HubSpot. But there's a spectrum here, increasingly code isn't all written from scratch. It leverages components and APIs. There's been incredible advancement in low code platforms that helped accelerate, development. But for a while, we still sort of saw this difference between the developer and the business user. And I think where we're seeing this no-code environment take us, is this concept of a software person that bridges across these personas. And the software person isn't a developer or business user so much as it's just someone who believes like, oh, there's something I want to have happen. I bet I could use software to make it happen. And that's where this, convergence around no-code tools. We're seeing, no-code capabilities, in more of those, config-oriented products. We're seeing more no-code capabilities coming in from low-code platforms. Tools like Workato, are able to, span that, whole collection. This is really exciting. And you might be saying like, oh my goodness, but like, what's the risk? Like, if we have these, everyone being able to do this decentralized self-service, and I will agree. I mean, there's non-zero risk, in empowering people with tools. But I want to put it in this perspective that actually most no-code tools are pretty good at constraining, what individual users are able to do, and at one level, this limits their power, right? Because at some point, if there's things you want to do that the no-code tool can't do, you'd have to do them in code. But it's also important to realize that this significantly reduces the potential harm. I'm not saying that there isn't, any risk of harm, with using no-code tools, but the amount of harm that, is at risk there relative to actually having even professional software developers build these things in code is quite remarkably different. And again, part of this is like, we're not talking about, using no-code tools to, launch, rockets to Mars, at least not yet. I mean, a lot of this is just applying these tools for use cases where, to be honest, it's just such a great fit. Like, what needs to be done is either something relatively simple, maybe it's only for internal use. Maybe we're talking about, something that's only going to be for a few users. Maybe it might have a limited lifespan, but in various ways, it's a relatively low risk proposition. And to empower decentralized self-service for that, actually just makes a lot of sense. And as it turns out, it's all those use cases that traditionally, they haven't been worth it to turn them over to professional programmers because, the time and cost involved in that, wouldn't be worth the ROI from it. But to have these things like self-service, through no code, actually the ROI can be incredibly compelling. All right, so, how do we balance that though, right? With great power, great responsibility. Or in karate and MarTech, I was going to get to this. In karate and MarTech, it's about balance. How much centralized control, how much decentralized empowerment. And a framework I'd like to leave you with is what I call the 8 Ps of self-service no-code MarTech, And so first and foremost, if you're implementing this capability, you want to think about the platforms, right? It's not just the no-code platforms that are usually very good at interacting with APIs, but you're going to want to make sure that the other tools in your stack are also opening up APIs so that they're accessible for that automation and integration. Partitions, right? You want to think about these tools, so they can be structured where different teams, different individuals can have their own spaces to work. So you're like minimizing the amount of collisions that you have to deal with, right? On the web page, website, like giving people, all right, you can have this whole little like web section, permissioning. Right? You want good controls over, okay, who can use which services, who's going to have access to which, data sources. Very important you have permissioning. I needed another P word, so I went with perception. But what I'm really talking about here, is making sure you have the mechanisms to be able to monitor for errors across these tools, and to also be able to do audits and identify if there's unusual behavior. But it's not just about the technology pieces. It's also about people and culture. We want to give people permission. It's not just permissioning like the technical thing. This is permission like a Seth Godin, encouraging people to experiment with these tools. To do that, we need to prepare them, provide training and enablement resources. We want to establish good principles, a few clear guidelines for what good use should be. For instance, like if you're going to make sure like, okay, we are not handling like financial transactions off of everyone's landing page. Just make this a clear guideline, and maybe most important, that we tap into the passion of how we can celebrate the success of this distributed empowerment. Because ultimately, all this stuff comes together to really leaning into this Gartner vision of the future of business around emergence of top-tier employees. They're not just in the creator economy. This is the corporate economy, the new corporate economy of scaled creation, and being able to leverage all these no-code capabilities to achieve that. It's just unlocking an incredible new era of what's possible in marketing and digital business. We can go from that question of, well, what if, to what about this? Fly onward, Cape creators. Thank you for having me. And I think at this point, we could have some time for Q&A.